Small businesses are the backbone of the American economy. For every dollar spent at a small local business, about 65% is reinvested back into the local economy. Hello and welcome to the Fervent Four. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? What's up, everyone? I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. And with me today, I have my co-host, Tim Ryan, lead man at StartWheel.org. Thanks for joining us. The Fervent Four is a weekly show every Thursday at 11 a.m. dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business, no matter the climate. The Fervent Four is powered by the SBDC, which helps local small businesses grow through counseling and resources like this show. If you're interested in learning more on how the SBDC can help your business, head to hrsbdc.com. Jim Carroll has been leading the SBDC for over 2 decades. He and his team have helped secure billions in financing for companies, thousands of jobs, and lots of smiling faces. Welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in. Jim, if we were to quantify the amount of people who have smiled because of the SBDC services, what do you think that number would be? Like, how many smiles? You know, like you go to McDonald's and it's like over 1 billion Big Macs served. Like, how many smiles would it be served from the SBDC?
Well, considerably less than the Big Macs, but
come on.
But we see anywhere from 400 to 500 clients a year, and so over 20 years, you can do the math. And then let's just say 50% of them are smiling when we are done with them. There you go. There's your number.
Okay, well, as a former math major myself, no, not me. I'm not going to do that math, but a lot of smiling faces. So there it is, the billboard. Lots of smiling faces. How did you get into business? Like, what's your background in business? How did you kind of figure out that was something that you wanted to do?
Well, it started with my father, who was the number 2 for a terrazzo and tile company up in central Pennsylvania. And he would take me out on field trips to work sites. He would take me to job fairs, to business conferences and the like. And I really got an appreciation for what was going on. I went to college. I was a history major, and I was in ROTC, and then went into the Navy immediately out of college. When it was getting close to me coming up on my retirement from the Navy, I realized that I could speak Navy very, very well, but I did not speak business. So I went to the City University of London. I was stationed in London at the time, and I went there and got my MBA in international business, with a secondary area of study in entrepreneurship and small business. I was astounded because in England, small businesses aren't appreciated. The majority of the small business owners are from other countries. And, I just found that amazing, especially when I come back to America and you find out that, small businesses are the backbone of the economy. You read the statistics from the SBA, and you see that, they account for 80% of the hiring done in the country and things like that. Why do we celebrate it and have so much success with it, and then other countries tend to, speak down or look down upon it? So it was amazing.
Was there a reason behind that? Did you figure out why, like, it was different in America than other countries?
Just a mentality. In England, everybody wanted to work for a large corporation, get their gold watch, and retire. In France, Richard Branson is a classic example. He was laughed at by everybody when he started Virgin Airlines, and British Airways thought they were going to take his, just eat his lunch. And turned around, Branson did just the opposite. He ate their lunch.
Yeah.
So it's the rugged individualist that companies over in England do not really have, or the mindset. And it's the same in France, the same in Germany, and a variety of other places.
You've done quite a bit of traveling yourself, Jim. Is there something that, other than just over in Europe and London, is there something that when you travel you look at and you're able to bring back into the States and say, this country or this area is doing something very different, or it's appreciated differently? Like, how is your traveling in the military and just for leisure really helped bring you a sense of kind of a small business, if you will?
Well, it taught me a couple of things, and that is that it's horses for courses. Sometimes what works in one country won't work in another country. Additionally, I see countries, especially those who heavily engaged in tourism, where if tourism goes away, such as with the pandemic, it's not going to be good for that country. Aruba is one of my favorite places to go, and 75% of the population is engaged in the tourist industry, and the other 25% are engaged in supporting that 75. So when tourism stopped, the planes stopped coming in, the cruise ships stopped tying up, you had rampant unemployment. And how are you going to handle that? Having just one particular customer is a very risky strategy.
Yeah, and with us being a huge tourist destination, one of the big pillars of our economy, I mean, what's any word yet on the street in terms of where the numbers are? Any signs of recovery, or are businesses even able to plan at this point for that recovery?
Right now, I'd say they really can't plan, or any planning they're doing is based on assumptions and not on facts. I'm on the board of directors for the Norfolk Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we look at STR all the time and see what the hotel occupancy rates are like. And it got very, very low at the height of the pandemic, and it is now slowly starting to come up, but it's going to take a while. And we are advertising very heavily with the city of Virginia Beach to bring people back to the Hampton Roads area. So it's an ongoing situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's definitely been a lot of. You don't have to look very far to see the negative things that have affected businesses. But I think on one positive side, at least from my point of view, is it seems like as a region, it's something that everyone has talked about, that we have to think more regionally. And it does, at least from my point of view, seem like that we have come together more so now than ever before. Do you see the same thing from your point of view?
I would certainly say that. I've seen more cooperation among cities and counties than I have in the past. Economic development directors are actively engaged with one another, and they're doing everything they can to make everything work around here. So it's very, very good. The chambers of commerce have gotten together and are cooperating very, very strongly. There's a new mindset of, we either hang separately or we hang together.
There you go. One thing that's interesting because of your travels, if you really think about it, one thing that someone would say from a regional perspective is that each of the 10 cities, 6 counties, and 1 town in that encompass Hampton Roads, the region, or the 757, depending on who you talk to, I guess, on that one. The hashtag the 757. Is that each one is kind of its own little micro destination. It is its own kind of like different place, which is kind of similar to what you were talking about from a travel perspective. So then I remember hearing you say that the closest thing ever to COVID, Corona, whatever we're calling it today, is that something from Franklin. Now, was that the Franklin paper mill closing, or was that the river disaster?
That was the flooding of the Blackwater River into downtown Franklin.
And that was what, 20 years ago?
1999.
Okay, and so paint the picture. Go back to memory lane. Like, what happened then?
Well, we experienced 2 hurricanes, one right after the other. The first one came in and totally saturated the ground, so the water had nowhere to go. Hurricane Floyd came rolling in, and the water just could not go anywhere. Therefore, it rose, and downtown Franklin was completely flooded out, I think, to a height of 9 or 10 feet of standing water. And a lot of it, there was oil in the water, there was sewage in the water. It was not a pretty sight, to say the least. So the town basically had to strip everything out. They took all the buildings down to the studs. They had to pressure wash it and clean everything. And then they slowly, but very, very purposely rebuilt the town. And it was quite successful. Now, the reason for the success was the city leadership and the state and the feds through the SBA were very, very proactive and leaning forward in devising a strategy to help the town survive. They had a very dynamic city manager. They had a very dynamic mayor who kept everybody focused on the ball. The other thing that saved them was the fact that the majority of their customers were not flooded out. And so people had the ability to come back into town and spend money and buy the goods and services that the town had to offer. So in that regards, it worked out well. The physical destruction was horrific. The psychological destruction was not that bad. With the COVID, it's just the complete 180. The physical destruction is virtually non-existent. But the psychological damage to employers, employees, and customers is staggering.
Is there something from Franklin 21 years ago that you looked back on and really just used in your arsenal of saying, okay, this is how we went through disaster then, and I think this strategy worked really well from then, and it's something that one could use for, quarter 2 of 2020 in coronavirus?
The biggest is access to capital. Back in the day, they didn't have the Paycheck Protection Program, so small business owners were limited to what they got from their insurance companies and what they got from their economic injury disaster loan, if they received an economic injury disaster loan. Now with the Paycheck Protection Program, people had additional money to ensure their survivability. So that was one thing that is definitely plays to the advantage today than we didn't have back then.
Yeah, and a lot of things that people may not realize that are listening today is the relationship the SBDC has with some of the parent organizations, if you will. So with the Small Business Administration, a statewide network of resources. So can you share with the viewers the different reach back and assistance that we can provide with those organizations looking for help?
Absolutely. The SBDC is funded in part by the Small Business Administration under a cooperative arrangement. And that is half of our funding. The other half I have to go out and raise locally from non-federal sources. And we do that from municipalities, financial institutions, chambers of commerce, community colleges, and the like. Because we're part of a statewide network under George Mason University, I have 25 counterparts located throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we get together on a weekly basis and share ideas, lessons learned, best practices, the thou shalt and thou shalt nots, everything along those lines in order to ensure successful operations across the board. There are things that work in one part of the Commonwealth that may not work here, vice versa, but there are things that are working there that can be easily replicated here. So we have this tremendous reach back through the SBDC network with the 26 offices throughout the Commonwealth and 1,000 offices nationally.
What's the number one question that you've received over your 2+ decades as the director of the SBDC from a business owner?
Yeah, where's the money?
And so there's a lot of answers to that, right? So some people are saying, oh, I'm opening a business, I think you're supposed to give me a grant, or someone is going to give me a grant. There's going to be free money in that case. I think the answer there is no real free money. Loosely is the easiest answer there. But then there's times where people are looking to raise money, but they're not ready for that. And then there's people who need to just make money, right? And so it's more of a sales and a marketing perspective. How do you kind of gauge where that business is in that spectrum of I want free money because I'm opening a business and I feel like the world is supposed to give me, a grant to start my business, to, oh, this business is actually investable, bankable, et cetera, to then actually all they really need is sales?
We go through and do a thorough analysis of the business, their business plan, their idea, their understanding of the marketplace, and we take a look at their financials. And if the financials don't add up, and before COVID, we had a benchmark of industry-specific numbers that we could pull out and evaluate their business plan. For instance, a restaurant, 30% of your costs are in food costs. Well, if I had a prospective business owner come in and said his food costs were only going to be 10%, well, then we knew he wasn't serious or he didn't understand the industry. So, it's back to the drawing board with some guidance from us.
Meaning he was miscalculating 20% of that.
Yeah, he underestimated 20%, which, good luck on that one. You're going to be out of business very quickly. The people who come in looking for grants, you're absolutely right. There are no grants. And we explain that, and that's really one of my hot buttons, because there are way too many unscrupulous people out there who lead people to believe that they have the secret sauce and they can get all that free government money if you only pay them anywhere from $50 to Matthew Lesko to $1,000 to Grants International or something along those lines. And they give you totally useless information, which is a shame because people get taken.
And so when someone is discussing with you and it seems like they're not, they don't have a good understanding or an appetite of what they're really getting into. And I think oftentimes that does happen where people just don't understand all of the hidden cost, if you will, right? And so they're like, oh, well, rent is $1,000. Food is another $1,000. Employees are $1,000. It's going to cost me $3,000 to run this business. But then there's all these other costs in there that they weren't thinking about: insurance, other employees, more food, utilities, and a plethora of other different things that they never were thinking about. Where do you kind of discuss that with them, where it's like, hey, like there is a lot more cost in here than you ever really thought about? Because I think when anyone starts a business, there's this upside that everyone's very optimistic about, and then they're just not thinking about all the costs that are there. So like, how do you kind of help guide them through that process of understanding here are really where all the costs probably are?
We have a variety of worksheets that we provide our clients and ask them to fill them out. And a lot of times it really opens their eyes when they see exactly what kind of costs are going to occur on a monthly basis. It's very, very interesting because there are some months where you're going to have that same expense month after month after month. Sometimes those expenses may be semi-annually, sometimes they may be quarterly, sometimes they may be annually. And so you just have to factor those in. So what I do is I have the worksheet, and with all of the different areas of expense that they would anticipate having as a small business owner. And all I ask them to do is just put an X in the block for each month that they think they're going to have to make this payment. And then when they get down to the bottom, figure out, okay, how many X's each month? And that'll give them an idea of what kind of cash flow they're going to be looking at as far as cash going out.
Yeah, and one of the things one of the things that really is so that saddens me so much is when the SBDC will get somebody and it's almost too late. Yeah, so to the folks that are listening, if you're thinking about doing something, set up an appointment. Talk to one of the counselors. I mean, the people, they care so much about your success and don't wait until it's too late to start that recovery effort. Do you see the same thing on your side, Jim?
Absolutely. There are many times when people who are in business come in to see us and they're already past the tipping point. There's nothing that can be done to save them. And that's very, very heartbreaking. But these things happen.
Yeah.
We walk them through a very, very structured process on how to shut their business down.
Yeah, and this is like the perfect storm. I mean, it's just amazing. The more you read and learn about just how razor thin margins are in business today, and just a small bump in the road, like we just experienced. It's not necessarily a small bump; it's a big bump. But the companies that have the 6 to 12 months of runway, they're the ones that are doing well. And the fundamentals of business is so important. And I know that you work really hard to teach those fundamentals. I fear my worst nightmare right now would be us entering hurricane season. And boy, wouldn't that be something?
Well, it'd be icing on the cake.
Knock on wood. Someone knock on some wood. Oh, goodness. Well, that's 2020, the year of the crazy, right?
I'm not skipping flood insurance this year. This is not the year to do it.
Jim, I'm interested. I know that there's a plethora of case studies of businesses that you have worked with over the years. Is there one that comes to mind that came to you and you knew it had a great opportunity? You knew that they could be a big win for the area, for jobs, for money, and they just need a little bit of help. Is there a business that comes to mind that you can think like, hey, like when they came to me, they were They weren't all there, but by the time like we made them a very successful business. Is there one that comes to mind that you can think about right now?
There's two in particular. One a long time ago was a furniture store down in Chesapeake, and the first phone call we got was from the owner saying, "How do I declare bankruptcy?" So we went down and took a look at their books and analyzed the numbers, and we found out that they really weren't anywhere near ready to go into bankruptcy. That if they changed certain bits of their practice, if they managed their cash flow better, uh, they could uh, they could succeed. And so we developed the model for them, and they followed it. And 6 months later, they called us back and said, "We just broke $1 million in sales, and if it wasn't for you guys, we never would have done that." And that's a real home run for us. We have a variety of other ones, but the problem is that we have this confidentiality agreement, and if I mentioned any of the businesses, even remotely, people could identify who they were.
And then you'd have to kill me for asking that question.
No, I'd have to kill myself for breaking the law.
There you go. Well, so forecasting is something that's incredibly important in a business. Is there something that you are looking at right now that maybe isn't on people's horizon or on people's kind of morning coffee, if you will, that maybe they should be thinking about?
Actually, I sat through a presentation yesterday for a new tool that we're going to be implementing in the SBDC called Finograph.
Mhm.
And it is a way for small business owners to analyze their numbers, and then using the algorithms and artificial intelligence, they can go ahead and project out what the cash flow is going to be in the future for the small businesses. We, as I said, I just learned about it yesterday. I'm going to get my people certified as Finograph advisors, and we're going to start using this tool. And it's great because we can actually plug in the numbers right from the business, and we can see what will happen and what could happen. But just by changing certain variables, we can see what kind of impact that's going to have on cash flow. So more to come on that one.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that is super cool that the SBDC is taking on is the amount of assistance with PPP, and I mean, it's just funny watching this journey continue on down the line. First, it was application, application, application. Now we are trying to figure out what the forgiveness procedures. Do you think we're at a point now where we somewhat understand what the procedures are for forgiveness?
We're still waiting to get the further guidance from the SBA on that. The financial institutions are lined up and ready to go. They've got their either third-party service providers in place, or in one case, they're working with the SBDC to provide assistance with their clients. And as I said, once the information is on hand, we will get it out to the greater network and get it out to the entire region so that everybody understands what's going to be required to get forgiveness.
So when it comes to funding, as the number one question that you've received specifically for a business to receive funding, I mean, I get this question quite often. It's like, should I take money? Should I go after money? Do I need money? How do I understand if I need money? Things seem fine right now. Do I go after money? Like, what is your go-to protocol for when someone says, hey, do I need money? Should I go after money? Should I accept this money type of question?
We go back and look at their numbers and analyze the financials to a fairly well, and we can show them if they do need the money, how much are they going to really need in order to succeed. If they don't need the money, okay, that's great. We make sure they understand the difference between short-term and long-term borrowing. If they get a line of credit, that's short-term borrowing, and that money has to be paid back very quickly because it's being lent out at a much higher interest rate. And banks do not like to have short-term capital being used to purchase long-term assets. So you don't want to purchase a huge printing machine and using your credit card. What you need to do is you need to go to the bank and get the appropriate loan, be it a 7A loan or a 504 loan, to finance long-term purchases so that you can amortize those payments out over anywhere from 5 years to 30 years, depending upon what you buy.
So what about the person in that case that says, I can't get the loan, but I have the space available on the credit card, and I know that I need that piece of equipment? Yeah, I understand it's not as great of a rate, but I need that piece of equipment. Like, what is your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts is how quickly can that turn cash positive for you? You know, if you're buying a large piece of equipment, how long will it take to get set up? What kind of additional training or manpower are you going to need to operate it? And then how quickly can it produce product that can get to the market and be sold so that you can start to see some cash returns?
And it's 2020. There's a ton of fintech companies. There's a ton of non-standard traditional type of financial options out there. Are things too good to be true? Are they? Are they shady? Like there's a lot out there. How do you know that it's not the random person emailing your grandma asking to send $1,500 type of thing? Like what's real and what's not? How does one track whether or not something is genuinely a good benefit to one or not?
Well, we just saw in the Wall Street Journal the past couple of days one of those fintech companies that just managed to lose $2.1 billion, and the head just got arrested. Yet he was the guru of gurus as far as fintech goes when they were flying high. It's kind of like Bernie Madoff and his schemes. There's always schemers and dreamers that are out there, but there are always a lot of legitimate people who unfortunately get tarred with a very broad brush because of the clowns that are in the marketplace that spoil it for everybody.
Yeah, that's that whole thing is just completely wild how that stuff even takes place in today's day and age. And again, I mean, that's where, again, the counselors with the SBDC, I mean, it's super, it's great to see the team that you have built, Jim, and the amount that people care to want to see the success from those businesses. So what's your aspect? How did you go out to build the team that you have?
Some was given to me when I took over back in 1997. And then others over time, I have established relationships, and I have my little black book of go-to people, and it's quite full, and I use it quite extensively. And we've been fortunate that over, since 1997, I've had some amazing people come in and work for me, and they have produced tremendous results. And Zach was saying billions of dollars. Well, I'd say millions of dollars, not billions, but I'll tell you what, the staff is the ones who they make it happen, and they make it happen on a routine basis.
I'm sure it's billions. You're just not you're being modest, if you will. So 1997, I'm not trying to show age on you or anything, but I want to show I want to show how long ago that was and how many different things have happened since then, right? And so 1997, I believe I was in middle school, and we had maybe dial-up internet at that point, and then the internet came through around then, got a little bit easier. Some people things have changed, and then obviously the internet got faster, and then we have this bad boy, right? Cell phones, and then something else is going to come later. I just watched this show on Amazon Prime called Upload, where the afterlife is saved, and like people can still communicate with them. Like, that's crazy innovation in 23-ish years. So how does a company innovate for something that they don't even know it's going to be there yet? Because we know there's something out there that you just said AI. I mean, AI is loosely used right now, but like, how does a company understand to innovate on something and not be too late, to be too early? Like, because 23 years has been a crap ton of innovation. Like, how do you gauge that? How do you tell a client, like, hey, like, I think this thing is potentially coming up, when it's not necessarily there completely yet?
Yeah, I'd say the best example of that is Steve Jobs. And when he and Wozniak got together and were looking at, their goal was to put a computer on every desk in America. And when they went to IBM, and said, here's our goal, and this is what we're going to do. And then we have this thing called a mouse, and this is what the mouse does. And we have GUI, and we have this, and we have that. And IBM basically laughed him right out of the office and said, there's no way that's ever going to happen. Well, fast forward, you see what you got. And then, Apple became first just computers and hardware. And then there was the battle with Microsoft. And then Apple reinvented themselves again and again and again and again. And you went from, computers where you had to boot them up every time to computers that were, getting more and more memory. You then went to Walkman. Well, Sony had the Walkman. Apple came out with theirs. And then they went forward. And then these things called cell phones that were bricks back in the day kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And, basically Steve Jobs was the visionary who was able to sit there and take them through and provide the guidance and then let his people run amok and make things happen. I would say the same with Elon Musk and Tesla. Started with cars. Maybe not that good, maybe that good. It's still up in the air. But, the guy put 2 people into orbit and brought the rocket ship back safely.
Oh,
I mean, talk about cost-effective space exploration. When you figure out how much they spent to put a man on the moon, or even put John Glenn into space back in the 60s, and now look at it today. By the way, the uniforms are much cuter than the ones that they were wearing back in the 60s. So, it's incredible.
It's just interesting hearing you talk positively about Elon Musk. That's just...
It's because, he knows that I'm on right now, and he doesn't want me to get on that soapbox. But I mean, it is neat, though, the similarities between Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and the amount of time with the space uniforms. That was something that Elon worked on for 4 years because he knew that he needed to provide something that was functional, but also something that was going to spark an interest in space exploration for children. And he wanted the kids to see that so that they would be inspired to learn how to code and grasp technology and become the next people to pass the torch on to. So it was super cool to hear that story.
It's interesting, though, as you say that. Like, I wrote down this word, like grit, right? Grit, resilience. Like, a lot of business owners, I think, lack grit. They lack resiliency through times like this. When Corona hit, you had all these people wanting to throw in the towel 20 seconds in. It was like, well, hold on. Like, we're 20 seconds into this. Like, we have no idea what's going on. I can understand months down the line, maybe, but like, where like your entrepreneurial chops. And so I remember when we met Jason Calacanis, I asked him a question similar to this about how do you build like an entrepreneurial child? How do you build resiliency and grit into your kids? And he said, we walk them up a mountain. And if the goal was to get up the mountain and they want to quit halfway through, we don't let them. We say, you got to get to the top or something like that. And it's something from a grit perspective that I don't think that's talked enough about. Like we condone failure and we talk about failure is cool and all that stuff, but it's like, hold on a second. Like, failure really it has become such a buzzword. People probably aren't even really failing, but like grit is such a powerful thing. And so, Jim, is there anything from a grit perspective or a resiliency perspective that like you've used in your life through business or just normal life stuff that's like really helped push you through? Because I feel like the most successful people in the world seem to have like an amazing feature of grit in them, an amazing like resiliency in them. And that's something that I feel like we need more and more and more of. Is there anything with resiliency or grit that like comes to mind?
Well, a couple of things. You need to have a fully functional compass, and I'm talking one that's a physical compass, mental compass, and a moral compass. You have to be centered. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to sit down every day and figure out, okay, what am I going to do, and how am I going to make it better? There's a great commencement speech given a couple of years ago by a Navy admiral, and it was called, "If you want to be successful in life, make your bed." And it's a fantastic YouTube video. It was University of Texas, and he's an alum there. And it really shows that, okay, if you set goals for yourself, albeit very, very small goals. I'm going to get out of the bed this morning. I'm going to make my bed. Okay, I accomplished it. This is good. And even if the rest of the day goes bad, you're going to come back to go to sleep that night. And what are you going to see? You're going to see the success that you had that day. And use that as an internal driver to move you forward, to have you face adversity and, overcome it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to think of the right word. It's not necessarily frustrating, but it's frustrating at the same time. Is I think that this region, we've become so comfortable because we have so much federal funding. The tourism is really, really strong, and so we've not really had to experience that grit. We have amazing universities and colleges. We have great businesses. We have so many resources. What do you think is keeping us from going to that next level? I mean, we have everything from a resource standpoint. What's holding us back?
I wish I had an answer to that question. I've been tasked, along with Brian Stevens, the CEO of the Chamber, to co-chair the Small Business and Retail Recovery Committee for the entire region. And right now, one of my staff members and I are going out and we're interviewing all of the economic development directors for the 18 cities and counties. And then we're going to gather that information, put it all together, and then figure out what kind of strategies are going to be required, what kind of actions are going to be required to achieve a goal of, is it going to be a rise in GDP? Is it going to be a rise in salaries? What exactly are we going to be doing for this region? So all I can say is stay tuned. We'll have something coming here shortly.
I'm a huge amusement park fan. I love a good roller coaster. I've been on over 150 different ones across the country. I don't think I've ever been on one internationally, but I recently saw that Busch Gardens was not going to open because they ran their numbers. Basically, they went through the small business development center checklist, if you will, and figured out that it was going to be difficult for them with only having a couple far less at capacity than they could run. For a business that is probably a lot smaller than Busch Gardens, that couldn't have 30,000 customers in a day. Like how do they justify or run or figure out a number like that to figure out, does it make sense for us to be open? And even in good times, right? Like I can just think about like conversations that I've had with Phil Decker at Diag, where he's like, I don't think that we should be open in the winter Monday through Thursday because we're not bringing in the traffic. It might seem weird to be closed during those days, but it's kind of the same thing of what Busch Gardens is going through now. So how does a business kind of look at whether or not they should be open or not, even when they can be open, to justify the numbers, instead of just being open to be open?
That is a major challenge. I'm dealing with a couple of entertainment type businesses, movie theaters and bowling alleys and the like. And right now, if you're an entertainment type venue and you are in phase 3 of reopening, you're only allowed to be open to 10% of capacity. Okay, 10% of capacity isn't going to pay the electric bill, let alone pay all the other bills you have. The small business owner is stuck because of events way outside of his control. And that's one of those challenges that you have to sit down as a small business owner, look at the numbers and figure out, okay, what's going to happen? I'm working with, a food restaurant, a franchise restaurant, and the franchise keeps lowering the prices through their promotions that they are having. And it is now getting to the point that when they build one of those sandwiches, they are losing 20 cents on every sandwich that they put out the door because the franchise says the price has to be this level. And, I've read in the paper that some franchises are going to the FTC and complaining about that nowadays.
So the sandwich costs a certain thing, and then they try to make money on other stuff, chips, drinks, upsells, cookies, etc.
Yep.
What about like a COVID tax? Is that something that you've seen? And do you think that a COVID like tax on there is something that a company should market towards? Hey, you're going to see this 13% increase for whatever, or what have you seen with that? What are your thoughts on something like that?
That is a question that is not a COVID tax per se, and tax is a bad word to use, but a surcharge.
Yeah, an increase because of right. Yeah,
and one of the questions that small business owners are facing right now is, especially if you are delivering through third-party service providers or delivering yourself, do you charge a delivery fee or not? Because that's cutting into your profit margin, especially if you're a restaurant. The question is, do you eat it and take a lower margin, possibly run the risk of becoming unprofitable, or do you pass it along and potentially run the risk of losing the customer because you just raise your price by 13%?
I mean, how do you not in the delivery case of that though? I mean, there's such a precedent that says that you do, right? I mean, like every major delivery company charges for a delivery fee. Some of them a percentage, some of them a flat fee. Like, I get that the customer wants to get that number low and they want to be able to deliver that to them at a certain thing, but kind of like what you just said with the sandwich losing 30 cents per sandwich, you're not supposed to be losing money when you finally reopen. So you got to be there. There is some sort of, would you use the word surcharge? There's a surcharge. There has to be a surcharge on there for a business to survive in there. And I think like the experience, the customer service that you get out of that, the availability to have that thing delivered, like you have to pay for it. Like, yeah, it sucks. You got to pay $3 to $7 to get this thing delivered. But if that's what you want, that's what you're going to have to do. Like you have to pay for that.
Yes, but that comes back to the old model of the customer needs to have three answers satisfied. Do I need this product? Do I want this product? And will I find value for money when I get it? And need and want, okay, that's great. But if value for money isn't there, a customer is going to walk, especially in these times when the majority of your customers are probably unemployed and they're very income constrained. And
but
they're going.
You as the business lose money because of that. I mean, to me, that seems like a very black and white answer. It's like, no, you can't lose money because of this extra thing that you're providing to them.
Well, if you're betting on the come and hoping you can upsell, then that's good. If you're betting on the come and hoping that this is going to be a customer that's going to come back in the good times because you were there for them in the bad times.
Yeah.
It is it's a real dilemma for a small business owner.
But also, I'm of the opinion that normal is never coming back. And so that there's a ton of innovation that's going to need to be happening in a lot of this. And if you start to create a new precedent that allows people to walk all over you in the specific case that we're talking about, like you've set a new number, a precedent that's going to be hurting you for the future, when I think that you could have looked at other things. I mean, Pizza Hut used to have dine-in buffets, and then they realized that wasn't the thing. People wanted to carry out, and then they wanted deliveries, and they started charging for it. There's tons of precedent in there. I look at it from, yes, I want the customer to be satisfied, not have to pay, an absorbent amount of money, but also I'm taking a ton of risk owning a business. I need to do these things to make sure that my family is going to be afloat during all of this, because to me, that's incredibly important.
And, the one thing we have to be careful of is, comparing apples to oranges. The example of the sandwich is a franchise, and a franchisor is the one who controls the relationship. If you're an independent restaurant, you have some more flexibility, and, you may be able to pass along those charges.
Yeah, I mean, take everything with a grain of salt, right? Everything's a little different between every little business, but if you're losing money to try and attract businesses, I hope that you have a strategy in place to get new business. I hope you have a strategy in place to recoup or to market into that so that they're coming back over and over and over again.
Right. And that's where your projections come into place, and you're going to be making assumptions up front that once we get back to some degree of normalcy, whatever that is, we still don't know, that you will have the flexibility to increase your profit margins by raising your price. Maybe you're going to increase your profits because you're going to have more throughput, more customers coming through the door than they are when everybody is income constrained. It is you're going up to the craps table at Vegas and you're rolling the dice, and you're going to hit 7 or you're going to crap out.
That's why I don't like that game, because I can never figure it out. A 7 is good or a 7 is bad?
I have no idea. I've never done it myself.
Come on, Jim. Double down.
Why not?
Wrong game. Tim.
Yeah, Jim. So you have a almost infamous road show that you go on where you travel from city to city and meet with different clients. Do you see that coming back soon? Are you going to be following the guidelines with phase 3, or how's that going to work when people want to come and get some assistance?
That's a great question, and I have a feeling that the traveling roadshow is going to come to an abrupt stop. I'll still do the counseling on dedicated days for dedicated municipalities, but it's so much easier for me to do a Zoom call. Instead of driving for 2 hours, I can see 2 more clients on a day. And there may be some cases where clients are going to want to have that face-to-face interaction, and I have no problems with that. But for ease of, ease and convenience, number one, increase in productivity, number two, and a decrease in costs, because I'm not buying gas and putting miles on my car. I don't have an electric car like some people I know. It's going to be, it's going to be so much easier to do it remotely than it is to do it on site.
So when someone meets with you, I'm curious, what is the one question, or what's the one answer that somebody would give you that would immediately would set you off, or that you don't want to hear? Does that make sense?
Yeah, especially when I say, who's your customer? And they come back and say, everybody's my customer. I said, well, I'm somebody and I'm not buying it. So, it's when they show that or if I ask how much money do they need, and he said, well, how much can I get?
$1 billion.
That's right.
In monopoly money. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
So that's the answer to the homework for folks that are setting up an appointment to talk to Jim. Make sure you know who your customers are and how much money you need and what you're going to spend it on.
And the answer really is, look, there can be everyone could be your customer, sure, but you're going to have subsets of those customers, and I think that's ultimately what we're getting at. Jim, I'm hearing, I'm not a doctor, at least I don't think I am. Maybe I play one on a weekly broadcast on the show. But
I heard your nickname is Dr. Love, so there you go.
Jim, you're not supposed to talk about that. Come on, man. Dr. Love in the house. I'm hearing November coming back around when it's not as hot anymore, when 2.0 can happen, when Corona 2.0 might happen. I don't want to predict that that's going to happen, but for a business that might be sitting here thinking, well, we seem to finally be coming out, and now it seems like they're already talking about July, August, September, October, in 4-ish months it happening again. I mean, what do business owners start to do to prepare for another quarantine, another mandated shutdown, another whatever majig? Like, how do you start preparing for something like this when you don't know?
I wish there was an answer to that one. I'd be a very rich man if I had that answer. You're just going to have to make assumptions, number one, and then number two, you're going to have to look no further than 30 days ahead, especially when you're looking at cash. You need to manage your cash on a weekly basis. And you need to be aware of what's taking place in the marketplace and be ready to, I hate to use the word pivot, but pivot, to shut down if necessary, if that's what's going to take place.
So should a business that could get access to capital that doesn't necessarily need it now has gone through all the numbers and seen that, knowing that that rainy day might happen. Should they try to start stockpiling cash and from traditional places so that things that they could try to be normal in that? Like, I mean,
well, for instance, right now with the SBA, if you get a 7A loan between now and I think 27 September, that's their primary loan vehicle. It's called the 7A loan. If you get a loan from the SBA or guaranteed by the SBA will pay your first 6 months payments. And so that gives you the flexibility of taking the money that you were going to set aside to pay your loan off, or at least start to make payments on the loan, and you can husband that money and put it away so that you have a cash reserve to carry you.
is there an asterisk on that?
No.
That's cool. How does so what so there's two types of SBA loans, the 7A and the 504.
Yes.
Is there like quick one line about each? Like, what's the difference?
SBA is working capital money, and 504 is real estate and large equipment.
Got it.
Speaking of real estate, where do you see commercial real estate going?
That is the $64 question, because everybody's gotten very comfortable working remotely, and businesses are now looking at, well, why do I need 27 floors of office space when I can have 25 of those floors working from home and only need 2 floors of office space?
Are business owners, are they at a point where they can restructure their existing leases?
Some of them may be able to, some of them may not be able to. It just depends on the architecture, and it depends on what exactly the business is. If you're a retailer, you're kind of stuck. You're going to have a physical presence.
It's going to be interesting because it could get there. I mean, so I would predict that the next wave, if you will, is that rent prices are going to go down to become attractive enough that businesses will eventually start again, but it's going to be a rough road until we get there.
Absolutely.
Who pays? So like when we talked about the internet, and we're talking about a very specific type of business, and we're talking about this, people who are working from home. Who is paying for the internet in that case when I'm working from home? Who is to pay for that? And then also, like, I feel like I've heard that like the internet companies have increased bandwidth for people who are working from home, but they haven't really teetered one way or another saying that that's going to stay up or stay down, because there is a throttling issue with Wi-Fi and bandwidth for people. Like, so is there any insights on kind of the bandwidth? Because that seems to be like, yes, hopefully you have an office in your house. Not everyone has that. Hopefully you have a table that you can put a laptop on or an iPad on or something like that. Hopefully you don't have screaming kids running around all the time because they don't go to school anymore and you can't go to daycare because everything else is shut down. But like from a bandwidth perspective, from internet, like who is paying for that, and what's going on with the throttling things? I don't know if you have any insights on either of those.
Well, not on the throttling, but on the who pays for it. Right now, it's up to the individual businesses and how they negotiate with their employees as far as covering things. The biggest issue is a cybersecurity issue. Even if you have a virtual protected network or virtual private network, VPN, if you aren't practicing good cybersecurity procedures at home, you can get your VPN taken down by somebody coming in with malware, ransomware, anything along those lines. So cyber is now a very big issue, and we've gone so far as to contract with an attorney who's going to put on 4 training programs on cybersecurity, and we're going to partner up with a white hat hacking company to talk about it from a technical standpoint and then from a legal standpoint. So we're going to have 4 courses coming up here starting later this year.
It just seems like if you are thinking about a business to start and looking for that real challenge that people are going through, and you have any chops in cybersecurity, this is the time to start it, from what you just said.
Quite possibly, yes. It's a matter of finding the customers, and remember, especially when you're dealing in my universe, which is small businesses, they don't have the money
to
afford to pay that.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Jim, because there's a lot of companies out there that they would rather roll the dice and wait for something to happen versus spend the money up front to prevent something that may not happen for another 6 to 12 months.
Or 6 to 12 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a call each individual business owner is going to have to make. And if you're a small business owner with razor thin margins as it is,
yep,
you're going to have to make a priority of what gets paid and what doesn't get paid.
What security or not, risk or not, like how do you make that decision on like what type of thing to do? Like how do you make the decision? I should have this, but I don't. I should do that, but I don't. Like how do you advise a company to make a decision like that?
Well, that's why we're bringing in outside experts who will sit there and not flog product. Get Norton's cybersecurity, cybersafe, or whatever. No, we're not flogging product. What we're doing is we're giving.
As you just flog that because Norton's a sponsor of the show. No, I'm kidding.
But we're giving them information so that they can make informed decisions as to how to proceed. In some cases, the risks may be perceived to be minimal. Okay, maybe you don't need all the bells and whistles, but maybe you need to implement some policy procedures and operating procedures to cover the weaknesses that you may have.
I've thought throughout all of this, it's really an acceleration of a bell curve of things that were already going to happen anyway. They're just happening a lot earlier. Do you have any, like, for those people who are quadrant 3 and quadrant 4s of a bell curve that are being forced to use tools like a Zoom, to be forced into something earlier than they wouldn't have wanted to, like, is that something that is going to, you think, continue to happen? Like, is this style of innovation going to rapidly be the new norm, where it's just, you're not going to get into these like long decades of not having to do anything? Or like, what do you think on that?
Well, case in point, take a look at what I'm doing right now. I'm that quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 kind of guy.
Oh, you're definitely a quadrant 4 kind of guy, Jim. Let's be honest.
So, but here I am sitting in my room using a StreamYard, which I never had even heard of, and being broadcast live.
But you're forced into that, and I think a lot of people are being forced into that. Like, do you think that the mandate or the forcing of stuff like this is going to help or hurt innovation?
I don't know. I really don't know, and I wish it could go either way.
It's just interesting to me, like, as someone who, you just, as Tim asked you about, your circuit rides and driving, hours and hours a week to do that. And now you're sitting there saying, and it seems like actually positively adopting a lifestyle like this, where it's like, I'm more efficient. I can put in more hours. I can put in more hours with clients. I can do those things. Like, it's almost like people want to find the negative first instead of saying, hold on, maybe this could be a really positive outlook of my life and my business if I look at this in a different lens. And a lot of businesses are constantly looking for that door to open, and they see it a specific way. And then this door opens and it looks nothing like the way that they thought it would. But actually, it's a huge benefit for them for their foreseeable future. And so it's interesting that hopefully people are starting to look at this as a positive thing more than a negative thing.
No, I agree with you on that one. And, glass half full, glass half empty, or the glass is the broken shards of my dreams on the floor. It all depends on your viewpoint. And you have to take a look at what's going to be the return on investment. And if I can see 2 more clients 2 days a week, that's 4 clients a week, that's 16 clients a month that I can serve, that I heretofore couldn't serve because I was stuck in traffic. And there's the other aspect of it is, it may take an hour to drive to Williamsburg, God willing 64 and the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is functioning. That could be 3 hours.
The negativity associated with that, like the psychological aspect of it, like,
I just turn on 80s on 8 and jam to the tune. So there you go.
80s on 8. Interesting. During, are you going to be like Tim and start running 2 miles every single day?
Oh, heavens, no. I'm 68 years old. That's for the young studs, not me.
Oh, boy.
Jim, what's the one piece of advice that you want to give every business owners today?
Two things. One is what Zach mentioned earlier, and that is having grit, having resiliency. But at the same time, you temper that grit and resiliency with there's no amount of good intentions that are ever going to change bad numbers. If the numbers just aren't there, then that business owner really needs to take a hard look at his model and figure out whether or not they should close.
Yeah, I mean, it's that is one thing. It's a painful pill to swallow, but the numbers don't lie. And red flag number one, if you don't know your numbers, then that could be the potential for some real bad things. And a lot of people have the attitude that if I don't look at the numbers, then I don't know. And if I don't know, then everything is okay,
Yep.
which is scary.
See no evil, hear no evil.
It's okay until you see it. What's something that we haven't talked about today that you thought we would talk about or want to talk about?
No, you guys pretty much covered it. You've really covered the waterfront with everything you've asked today.
There you go. Do you think the jean jacket look is a good one for me?
Okay, Mr. Jobs.
Mr. J. Hey, sometimes it's cold. When so I'm just from a personal perspective, like, what are your thoughts on all of this? Like, it's the craziest times ever. Like, it's like something else. Like just when all this has gone through, like what's gone through Jim Carroll's mind?
Okay, just another chance to excel. This is an opportunity, and it is. It's an opportunity for the SBDC to do what we're supposed to do, and that is take care of our small businesses. And going back to that team that I assembled, that's what we're doing. And I can't say enough about the group that I have working for me.
When you hear a story of someone being, I don't know, spammed, scammed, whatever, like how do they, and it wasn't through the SBDC, it was through something else. How do they not get to that position so that they don't work with the person that isn't going to help them, that is going to screw them? Because I know you said that was something that it really hurts you. So how do they understand that they're not to not work with that company who seemed so reputable?
I don't know. Because its perception is, you could sit there and lay out a perfect airtight case that every jury in America would convict based on the evidence being presented. But if the person you're talking to has a feeling that runs counter to that, they are going to take away whatever you said, and they're going to discount it because their perception is reality for them. And we just have to build as strong a case as possible, as objectively as possible, and lay it out. But then at the end of it all, we are not consultants, we are counselors, and they are free to either accept or reject our advice as we put forward.
In 10 years, when we look back and we see a calendar that says 2020, what will it read?
The year of lunacy. Oh, seriously. The pandemic, the massive unemployment, the rampant social unrest, and as Tim said, God forbid a hurricane too, just to add to the fun. I mean, I think we've all collectively lost our minds as a group, and it's going to be people like us, to the sane ones in the group, to get everybody back onto a balanced course, get themselves recentered, and have them moving forward. Because if we don't, then the game's over.
Yeah, now's the time to support one another and love one another. That's for sure.
Yeah, call your clients, call your families, call your friends. Don't just like a post on Facebook, folks. actually have real one-on-one conversations. It's a very powerful thing. In 10 years, we're going to look at this as the year of lunacy. Compliments or quoted by Jim Carroll. Who knows? Maybe this will go down as the greatest year in your business ever. That's definitely something that I think that you can do, and it takes a lot of work, but stay positive out there, my friends. Tim, any last words?
No, that's always insightful stuff, Jim. Appreciate you. Appreciate your team. Their heart is definitely in the right spot. Anybody listening, contact the SBDC. They're there to help, and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that you're on that pathway to success.
Jim, any parting words?
Nope, I thank you for your time, and more importantly, I thank you for the support you're giving us.
Absolutely. If you guys,
without it, we couldn't succeed.
Absolutely. If you guys are interested in getting counseling from the Hampton Roads Small Business Development Center, learn more and head to www.hrsbdc.org. I just wanted to say www because it's fun, and that was so like 20 years ago. But appreciate you guys listening today. Until next time, have a wonderful week. Stay positive and support a small business. Until next time, I'm Zack Miller. That's Tim Ryan and Jim Carroll. See you all on the flip side. Peace and pancakes.
See you, everybody.